Welcome to another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at artistfirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Deborah Ruffini.
Greetings from England. This is Deborah Ruffini with another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show. Today it is my pleasure to be speaking with the amazing Mary Knight, survivor of extreme child abuse. Mary has devoted her life to helping others of this horrific thing. Mary, so happy to be chatting with you today. How are you doing?
Good.
Oh, that's good. What's the weather like in your neck of the woods? We're far apart.
Yes. It's not raining today. We get a lot of rain this time of year.
Oh, do you?
And yeah, so I'll be going on a walk later today.
Oh, lovely. Brilliant. That sounds good. It's been a bit drizzly here, so I don't think I'll do the same thing. I'd have to get my wellies out. Mary, I was incredibly touched by your program that I saw. It was quite recently, actually, and the Am I Crazy? Your journey into determining if your memories were true.
Yes.
Would you care to share with us what those memories were?
Oh, yes. I am a survivor of extreme child abuse, and I told about something that happened after my sister's death. She died of cancer in a hospital, but I told about the desecration of her body, of her corpse. And I also told about incest by my father and my mother. I'm a survivor of what's called familial sex trafficking. My parents were the ones who pimped me, so I'm a survivor of ritualistic abuse, of incest, and of familial sex trafficking.
Oh my goodness, that's just that. I mean, that sounds just like the horror of all horrors, the worst ever nightmare. But to actually have lived that, it's just mind blowing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's why I didn't remember. It was many survivors of extreme abuse don't remember until they get to a point in their life where it's safe to remember. It wouldn't be safe for me to remember all the time or have conscious memory of the abuse. So I was able to, for myself, I was able to only remember it while it was going on.
Wow.
And that way I could have this other life where I did well in school. My parents, had lived a double life, and they, my mom used to proofread my papers. I have a good education. I didn't remember my abuse until after I had a master's degree in social work.
Wow. So how did that happen? What actually, what was it that triggered those memories?
My aunt decided that it was time to tell her brother, my father. So my aunt had similar memories. They were recovered memories, but she'd remembered for a few years. And she told my father and mother about it. They just totally discounted her. They said, "We think she's crazy. We'll never see her again." But I went and talked to my aunt, and that was what triggered my memories. At that point, I had 3 cousins with similar memories. And later, one of my other cousins remembered. So I have 4 cousins and an aunt with memories similar to mine of the generational abuse.
My goodness. And that's pretty much confirmation, isn't it? I mean, apart from you actually knowing yourself, this is what happened, to have that sort of support, confirmation.
Yes, I do. I feel like I have a lot of confirmation, and yet many people don't believe me. And I will point out that all of us have recovered memories, so none of us have continuous memories. That makes a difference in court. I wasn't able to, my parents never faced. My parents died without having ever been arrested. My mother or my father had never been arrested for anything.
So that makes it even worse. How seems terribly unjust.
Well, it is, and my concern, of course, is how it affects other children. So I tried very hard to get some kind of justice, not so much for me, but for the children of today, and was not able to do so.
Yeah. That in itself, what you've just expressed there, is horrific enough. But I think there's something worse when it's done, carried out in the name of a loving Heavenly Father by those who claim to represent and love and worship an all-loving Heavenly Father. There's something. I think it makes it worse.
Yes, I was able to separate that it wasn't God, and so I have a very good relationship with God.
Oh, good.
But yeah, it could have been. But they did things to try to desecrate communion. So I mean, they really messed with me.
Mm. How do you feel about sharing about what actually went on? I mean, it's no problem if you can't.
Oh, I can. Okay. Yeah.
Only if you feel
so. I'm talking about after my sister died. She died in a hospital.
Sorry.
She was 11 years old. I was 9 years old.
Crumbs.
And someone from the funeral home apparently picked her up at the hospital, which is what usually happens, picked up her body. But someone from the funeral home, and I say someone because I don't know. I know who the owner of the funeral home was, but I don't know that it was the owner. I mean, the owner of a funeral home can't do all the work because they'd have to be working around the clock. So, the man who was, I guess, employed by the funeral home brought her body to outside of my childhood church building, and there was an area with a lot of trees over to one side of the building, and that's where they laid her body, and my father cut it with a knife and then made me cut it, which was really upsetting to me. And then they put her mutilated body in a coffin, and they put me in the coffin with her body. And what I remember about that is that I still liked being close to her. Like, I touched her hair. I mean, she was still my sister, and I still liked being close to her. So you would think a child would be, horrified to have to get in a coffin. But I just remember touching her hair. I just remember I knew I wouldn't get to be with her ever again. So that part of the experience wasn't horrifying like you might have thought. And then we went to the funeral home, which is not very far away from the church. And there was more mutilation of the body there in the funeral home, and I've been back to the funeral home, so I think I know exactly where it was. There's stairs that I remembered there. The funeral home has now been knocked down, so I actually went there as an adult shortly before it was torn down. But they mutilated her body more, and they said they put her body in my mouth, which would be like communion. But I have more recently remembered that it was after making the film that I remembered that it was never her body, because I eventually remembered the taste, and it was the taste of communion wafers, like they have in mainstream denominations. The denomination I was raised in was very conservative, and we used matzah, like the Jewish bread, the Jewish unleavened bread. But I remembered the taste, and it's communion wafers like they would have in Methodist or Episcopal churches.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, what I think to me that meant was they wanted to desecrate, they wanted to make communion difficult for me, even if I left the Church of Christ, which I was raised in, and I went to another denomination. But in fact, I love taking communion. So they were not able to desecrate it for me. I think communion's a beautiful tradition.
Yes. Oh, it's good that you've held on to that, and it's good that it hasn't affected your relationship with your Heavenly Father, which is good, because that could have gone one of two ways, couldn't it?
It could have, yes.
Yeah. Did you feel at that time that where was God? Had He abandoned you?
I made it was, as I was doing my healing work, I was angry at God, and I think it's fine to be angry at God. God can handle that. And then I had this kind of intuition or of God being there holding my hand and crying. So I made a film that has that in it. It's on my website, and it's PG-13 dramatic comedy about twins, but it has that kind of sermon within the film, and the priest says that is when when his dad was beating him up, that he thought God was there holding his hand and crying.
Yeah.
So I got to put that in my creative work, but that's what I believe.
Oh, great, yeah. That's good. That probably got you through. Probably helped immensely in getting you through.
Well, and I don't want to minimize how hard recovery has been for me.
Yeah.
And I do still have sleep issues, which I wish would go away. But anyway,
it's natural.
I have nightmares, and so recovery is very difficult. And I think sometimes survivors compare themselves to someone they hear, like on a radio show, and think, well, I'm still struggling so much. But I struggled. I always believed in God, but I was, like I say, I was angry at God. I've had difficulty with Christian images.
Yeah.
I remember talking to an Episcopal priest who gave this wonderful lecture, and when I went in to see him, he said, "Do you want to close the door?" And I said, "No." I mean, I didn't even feel comfortable being alone with him. And I talked to him about that images were hard for me to think of God as Father because of what my father did.
Sure.
Think of God as Mother because of what my mother did.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he said, "What about fire?" Well, my abuse included some fire, so I said no. And then he said, "What about light?" And I said, "Oh yeah, light. I could.
Yeah.
That's an image that I could be fine with." So he said, "Well, how about if you look up all the Bible verses that include light?"
Oh, wow.
And there's lots of them.
Oh,
So I thought it was really good advice at a time when I couldn't really think of God as in a familial way.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a beautiful thing, isn't it? That's well thought out. That's God is light, isn't it? At the end of the day, and it's I was so proud of you. You come so far. It must be an ongoing struggle because it's so deep rooted, isn't it? And it's not something that you're gonna forget very easily. But sorry.
Go ahead.
I felt you were so gracious, in the film that I saw. It was because I was feeling angry on your behalf.
Yeah.
And kind of the I won't mention names, but the two counsellors, I mean, loosely based, can we call them counsellors?
You mean Dr. Elizabeth Loftus.
Yeah.
Is that okay to mention
Yeah,
that name?
that's fine, yeah.
Yeah,
That came from you.
and Eleanor Goldstein. And Dr. Elizabeth Loftus is a psychologist.
Oof.
She is a professor, and she has really spent a lot of her professional life trying to discount memories like I have, recovered memories. And there's new research out that Dr. Vanderkolk is in my film, and there's, really a rich, he's a neuroscientist, and there's I'm not saying that word right, but anyway, that we know more about traumatic memory now. We know it's valid, but Dr. Loftus still says it's not. And so she's someone I went to talk to because, I let her ask me any questions or make any comments about my memories, which is what you saw in there.
Yeah.
She discounted them. And one way she discounted them, which was really interesting, was she asked, why I believed them, and then I told her about my relatives, and she said, well, I haven't talked to your relatives, so I don't know if that's true. I said, well, you asked why I believe it, and I believe it because I believe what my relatives say, so yes, that was a really hard interview. I'm so glad that interview's over.
I bet.
But I needed to do it. I think I needed to do the things that would challenge me to the greatest extent, and doing it on camera was more of a challenge too.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I needed to do something really major to really to really question my memories, because I don't want to believe something that's not true.
No.
And the result of my film, I believe my memories even more strongly than I did before. And I've had to really, in the end, I couldn't base my memories on anything, not even my relatives' memories. I just had to know deep within myself that this is true. And I think that's the ending for almost all survivors. We don't have proof. And even when we have a lot of proof, other people don't necessarily believe it. We just need to believe it deep within ourselves, because we are the experts of our own inner life, of our own memories of our own childhood.
That's absolutely right, isn't it? I don't understand the whole. As I was watching this, I was really struggling with. My key question was, why is this person automatically assuming that what you're saying is false? I didn't understand that bit. It was almost like the glass being half empty with her.
Well, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus has made a lot of money testifying, in trials, and she testified in Lynn Crook's. Lynn Crook sued her parents. Lynn's father was a physician, and she won. But Dr. Loftus testified on behalf of her father, and testified that Lynn's memory shouldn't be believed. But the judge. The judge ruled in Lynn's favor.
Good.
So that's just one of many, many examples of her testifying. But what I thought was interesting about her is, she's gone public saying she's a survivor of sexual abuse, that she was fondled by a babysitter at age 6, and a male babysitter. Yeah. And and so I asked her about that, and she said, well, I don't think it affected me at all. But then she also has publicly said that she thought she was pregnant when she was 13 years old. And she thought that she had, and I asked her about that on camera, and she said, yeah, when she was 13, the other girls were getting their periods, and she didn't get hers. So she thought maybe when she was 6 and she was fondled, he had left sperm, and that had made her pregnant. Well, one thing is, she was fondled and there was no sperm involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I verified that with her when she was on camera, and I mean, you don't get pregnant from fondling,
No.
and you don't get pregnant from something that happened 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So it made, I think it affected her greatly to have that fear at that age, and she never told her parents about it. So to me it seems like she's kind of hiding. She doesn't want society, she's hiding. I don't know. To me it's very connected.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. And it's a bit of a cheek, really, that her memories are valid, but anyone else's aren't.
Yeah. Yeah, because she has no proof, right? She has absolutely no proof. And she didn't tell anyone at the time.
Right.
And, yeah, that's, yeah.
Just
it was, she's really hurt a lot of survivors, and I get a lot of comments from survivors who have been very affected by things Dr. Loftus said. One of my friends believes her sister believes, had it not been for the things Loftus said, that her sister would not have committed suicide. So I have a friend whose sister committed suicide, and she really blames it on Dr. Loftus.
Does she? Oh, how tragic.
She does, yeah.
Oh, that's awful. And I wonder if, does Dr. Loftus know, is she aware of this?
Oh, yeah, she has she's aware that she gets a lot of negative comments, for sure.
I wonder if she feels even an ounce of remorse about how...
No, she thinks she's helping people by getting, innocent people off, and she has. I mean, she has testified in trials that, from what I read all her books before I interviewed her, and she's testified in a case that I think the person was innocent. It had nothing to do with child sexual abuse. It was a young man who was young black man who was falsely accused. So, I mean, it's not that she hasn't done anything, but she doesn't, she just feels good about getting innocent people off. I asked her about a case where a man had been accused of murder based on memories that his daughter had, and those memories were recovered memories, but they were corroborated, and he ended up getting off. He was in prison and getting out, but I said, that, I mean, it's basically public record that he had child pornography in his apartment when he was arrested. And she's like, oh, yeah, but that wasn't murder. I mean, to me, it bothers me for someone who uses child pornography to be out among the public. But that didn't, she just felt good that she got him out of prison because he hadn't committed, and I think she believes he hadn't committed the murder.
But it's like defending the guilty, isn't it? I mean, why? It doesn't make it. It's very messed up.
Yes, I think so. It really is. It really is. Yeah. And then Eleanor Goldstein was the other person.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Some of the viewers get mixed up and think that she's a psychologist, but she has no degree in mental health. Okay. And she she has written 3 books, and all 3 these books are about are saying that memories like mine are false, and it comes out in my film. I was going to go interview her, and I found out actually from Lynn Crook. So Eleanor's daughter is a survivor of abuse.
Oh.
But she had never gone public until in my film. She's public in my film. And so Lynn talked to her and asked if she'd be willing to, and she decided to go public since her mother was in the film. Yeah. But that's pretty obvious why her mother would want to discount recovered memories, because she has recovered memories of abuse.
Oh.
And so she doesn't want her daughter to be believed.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah. And there's a organization called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. It closed in the United States in 2019, but the British one is very active.
Oh, is it?
British False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
That's interesting.
And they really, their whole goal is to get people to not believe recovered memories. And most of the people in the organization that I know of are family members of survivors. They don't want their family members saying these things. They don't want their family member being believed.
Oh, how horrific.
Yeah, it really is. That there's actually an organization. And so that's why so many people in the media think that recovered memories are false, is because of the media campaign done by the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
But I'm just trying to think, okay, 10, 20 years ago, where was my life? I would have been roughly 30, 20 years ago, and I can remember things or even like when I was 5, and we know the difference between a dream or something we saw on TV or we read about than an actual memory. We know what's a memory, don't we? We all know what memories are.
Well, yeah, when I was first remembering, I didn't, one thing about it is I didn't want them to be true.
Yeah.
I had to leave my whole family. I had young children, and I couldn't have them around, these people, after I remembered.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to leave them because no one's parent is bad all the time.
Yeah.
And so I remember begging God that it wouldn't be true and that I wouldn't need to make that call to my father. And I really don't know that I would have called my father and confronted him, except for I had children. My children were supposed to go visit my parents, and I called and said, my children will not be coming to visit you.
Yeah.
And I thought, very naively, my father would get counseling, and I hadn't remembered the sexual abuse yet. I just remembered him holding a dog roughly. I'd known there were sometimes they do animal sacrifices and ritualistic abuse. But I thought he'd go to a counselor with me, and instead he said, "Is this going to lead you to believe I sexually abused you?" He's the one who brought it up. But so no one wants this to be true, and that's one thing when you look at memories. If it's something you want to be true, but this isn't. And but I would, at first, I would just. It was so hard. I would doubt my own memories, and I decided to limit myself to 2 days a week. And I wasn't allowed to even think they might not be true except for those 2 days a week. And then my analytical mind could do it. And later I limited it to 1 day a week. But those days were just horrible because you are kind of turning against yourself. You're turning against your own mind.
Yeah.
But when I remembered, I would the memories when they did come came so quickly. And they were really overwhelming. To your listeners who may be starting to remember things, just be really careful with yourself.
Right.
because it's really hard.
Yeah, I bet it's yeah, it must be awful to sort of just be living life normally and then, oh, hang on a minute, this happened, and then this happened, and then
Yeah,
this happened.
it's so hard. And I had my cousins, and they wouldn't tell me about their memories until I asked. So they told me, they alluded to a time that something really horrendous happened,
Mm.
and the ages, so I knew how old I would have been. And then I remembered it, and it was so different than what I thought it was going to be, that I thought it was a different memory. But then when I told them, they're like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant. It was just horrible in a different way than I had thought. So I really appreciate my cousins
Yeah.
doing that. And that's one reason I made the film, is I want to help survivors as they're remembering things like my cousins helped me.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's brilliant, and it's God moves in mysterious ways, and I think He uses
Yes.
awful things to. But it's awful that people have to go through these awful things in order to help and support others, isn't it? But it's awful. I mean, a parent is supposed to represent nurture and care and protection, and so I'm just intrigued, Mary. How did your mum and dad tie this in with? So you were were you churchgoers?
We went to church 3 times a week. My parents were, my father was a church leader.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, they, in the church I was raised in, each congregation is autonomous, so the leaders of that church, there's no one above them. I mean, it's said that God's the only one above them.
Mm.
And so that makes it like there's no one to report something to, because there's no one above them. And I got a comment. Someone saw my film and said, well, that's not satanic ritual abuse because your parents weren't worshiping Satan. And I said,
well, I think it is.
I don't know what was going. A viewer of the film, because the film has now been viewed 53,000 times.
Wow, good.
And I get comments, and I do have my email address there, so people can email me. Someone emailed me and said, it's not. It didn't fit her definition of satanic ritual abuse because they weren't worshiping Satan. I said, I know what happened to me. I don't know what was going on in my parents' mind when they did what they did. So I don't know if they, some of the things they did seem like things that someone would do with worshiping Satan, or I don't know if I don't know why they did what they did. I did, though. I do have another film up. It's a 2-minute film, and it's on the same YouTube channel. It's on Real Stories. Let's see, Real Women, Real Stories.
Yes,
Real
I saw
Women,
that.
Real Stories, and it's just 2 minutes long, and the title of it is "Why My Mother Molested Me."
Yeah, I saw that. Mm.
Okay, yeah. So it tells about my mother's child abuse, and it gives, I think, some idea of why she did what she did.
It goes back to the saying, isn't it? Hurt people hurt people.
Right. But we can heal, and then we don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to carry on, does it?
Right. Because I think survivors who focus on healing are some of the kindest, gentlest people in the world. And I'm getting comments from people like that. I so appreciate people viewing the film, and I so appreciate people making the wonderful comments they've made.
Yeah. I really feel for you. I've had a previous guest on the show, Mary, called Nancy Little. She's she was raised in a Christian home, a survivor of sexual abuse by her mother, and she hasn't been believed by various people, and that's been tough for her. But it's, again, going back to the whole thing about it seems worse when it's done in the name of the faith. It also seems no abuse is good, but I think there's worse types and worse, the psychology behind it. And again, women, we expect women to be the gentler sex, and again, motherly. And I run a website raising awareness of female-to-female abuse, and I've known...
Oh, yeah, that's good that you do that, because I just got a comment that I answered today, and it was my mother did this, and people don't believe me because it's my mother.
Oh, was it?
I talked to another young woman recently who, her stepfather was, based on her report, was apprehended when she was a little girl and served time in prison. But she told people her mother was in on it, and they didn't believe it.
Oh.
So she had to live with her mother. I mean, if they believed her about her mother, then they certainly wouldn't have had her living with her.
No.
So, yeah, people just don't want to believe abuse by mothers. But the other part of that I do want to say is that you can't compare abuse. And I have one friend who, she had life-altering chronic pain, debilitating, and she recovered her memory, and it was of her brother when they were just kids. They were like 11 and 13.
Oh.
And it was a one-time thing, and it wasn't life-threatening. It wasn't physically painful, and yet that affected her so much. So I just want people listening to know that I don't discount any abuse, that it can have tremendous effect on you, a one-time thing.
Yeah.
And some people say, well, my abuse isn't as bad as yours, but we're just different people. It's like saying, I like chocolate ice cream better than you like chocolate ice cream.
Yeah.
Each person is individual, and you can't compare one thing to another.
That's true, yes. Yeah, you're spot on there. What may affect one person that we think, that's trivial, may affect someone bigger, and what a bigger thing for another that society would generally class as something, awful, may not affect them as it's none of it is okay. I think also it's quite common for people who are believers to carry out abuses. It's kind of if God has specially selected me, and
right.
It's whole, I can jolly well do as I please, because at the end of the day I belong to Jesus, or I belong, so therefore you find that a lot in church leadership, don't you?
Yeah, I don't remember them making any justification. It was like they led double lives where they, teach Bible classes, and then in this other part of their life they'd abuse me. They did desecrate, but I don't remember them making excuses related to the Bible. I can't think of that. I just finished. I'm writing a memoir, which is a collection of essays, and I just finished my essay, "Sex Trafficking in Church Settings: What It Is and How to Stop It."
Great.
And I was trafficked. Child pornography was taken of me. In church. Yeah, in a church setting. It wasn't while church was going on, but I was abused.
Sorry.
Yeah, a lot inside church buildings, out on church building grounds, and my parents and my grandparents had keys, or one of my grandfathers had a key because he was a church leader. So anyway, I wrote that essay because I want churches to know that, obviously if a child's abused, you turn that into law enforcement, obviously. But there's some situations that law enforcement cannot investigate. One of those is if there's already been law enforcement investigation and it was found inconclusive. Another one is if it is past statute of limitations, if it's recovered memories, and so in those situations, the church itself can hire a private investigator and can investigate.
Oh.
So there's an organization I recommend. It's in the United States. I imagine I'm sure they would give advice to people in another country as well. But it's called Godly Response to Abuse in Church Environments, GRACE, the GRACE. And they are made up of investigators and ministers and, people who are trained investigators from various backgrounds, mental health, law enforcement, and or retired law enforcement. And so they'll investigate, and that way you can quit having that person teach Sunday school. You can, if they, and maybe they would uncover enough that that could then be turned over to law enforcement and the person would be arrested. But that sort of thing is needed, because otherwise, if you hear of child abuse in a church, well, I went back to my childhood church when I was when I was mid-40s. I was about 45.
Right.
And I told people there, and they seemed like they believed me, but I told them my father had moved to another state, but I told them one of the people who sexually abused me when I was a child is still at your church. And it seemed like people believed me.
Yeah. And
then I went back 6 months later, and they had made him an elder. They had made him a leader in the church.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. They voted, but there were enough people who voted in favor. And it's like, if they had done an investigation, I hope that he wouldn't have been a church leader.
Yeah.
It didn't help that he was a major financial contributor to that church. So you need an outside investigator who doesn't know or care how much someone contributes, who doesn't know or care what their reputation is, because people with good reputations abuse children. And so you do this outside investigation. Otherwise, it usually falls on the minister to do the investigation. They're not trained to do investigations.
No.
Yeah, they're not experienced.
Those with power are more believed, aren't they? Because we look up to the man of God.
But it levels the playing field if you have this outside investigator who just comes up with facts and then shows you the facts, and then you make decisions based on those facts.
Yeah.
So I'm very much in favor of that. I used to be an investigator. I did social worker, but I did forensic work. So I did in divorce cases. I interviewed both parents, and I evaluated every allegation that was made. I'd find collateral sources, and sometimes, I found, it was amazing the things I found in some cases. So I very much believe in investigative work, and I believe churches need to employ that, because some churches believe the minister is God's mouthpiece, but I think any reasonable person would say that's not the person who needs to be doing an investigation.
Yeah.
It needs to be someone trained and experienced, because I didn't do that good on my first investigation. After I had 15 years of investigative experience, I did much better.
Yeah, and it needs someone unbiased to a situation as well, doesn't it? It's
totally. Yeah. I would never have been allowed to do an investigation for the court if I had known the mother or the father.
No.
It's just, you don't do that.
No, of course. It's interesting you mention about Grace, because is it the founder, Boz? Now I've got to learn how to pronounce his surname.
Oh, you know him.
Well, he's going to be the guest on our November show.
Yay!
So
I'm so glad.
it's
I like
interesting.
getting word out. I really like him. I've only talked to
Oh,
him by phone, but I
yeah.
really like him. That's great.
Oh, wonderful! I don't know him. I just contacted him. It was I was on a roll with the YouTubing, Mary, when I saw yours and then I saw his,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
so
I'm so
that's
glad you're going to interview him. He's
oh
so knowledgeable.
oh wow, yeah, he strikes me as a good soul like yourself. But it's interesting you mentioned that. So well, these things are meant to be. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Yeah, my religious views are much, much more liberal than Boz.
yeah.
But that our views on should child abusers be apprehended are exactly the same. I mean,
Mm.
you don't. We totally agree that churches should hold child abusers accountable and should
Yeah,
protect children.
that is that, and that's beautiful, isn't it? That we can disagree on.
Yeah.
My beliefs have changed theologically over the years, and I think sometimes that does happen. But it's good that we all stand together on this thing that is
Oh, definitely.
absolutely wrong, you know. Um, but it's yeah, no, that's good. I love what you said towards the end of that broadcast, Mary. That you said I want to have the kind of mother I am. I
Yes.
thought that's because I thought, oh, I bet you're a wonderful mother, and have no doubts that you're,
Thank you. Yeah, I
amazing.
like mothering. We have a foster child with us right now. For
Oh,
2 weeks. He's at
lovely.
school,
Yeah.
but we're respite foster parents, so we still, so I'm still involved. I cooked a big meal for him yesterday,
Oh,
and we did an art project, and yeah, I am very nurturing, and my sons are grown.
yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting because with my father, as you see in the longer film, my ending with him was that he was never my father and that God has always been my only father. I thought I'd have the same ending with my mother because even after I finished that film, I was not done with grieving my mother, and I started on another film, Mothers and Molestation, a film about child abuse, which is not out yet.
Oh,
But when I went through that process, my ending was to be my own mother.
oh wow.
So it was really clear that's what I need to do, and yeah, I do try to nurture myself.
Great. Oh, I like hearing that. Because I just, I thought this is a complete stranger, but I want to wrap her in cotton wool.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I felt when I was. But yeah, it's a horrific thing. I mean, I've never been. I'm not a parent myself, but I can feel for parents who have to witness things like that and horrible things,
Yeah.
and it's no, I think it's one thing to be a survivor of this awful thing, but it's another thing entirely, isn't it, to want to go on to help other victims. I don't know about the word victims or victim survivors. I like the word survivors better.
I say survivors.
Survivors, yeah, it's survivors, isn't it? But it's, I just think I'm very proud of you for all that you've done.
Oh, thank you.
All
And
that
I
you
meet a
continue to
lot of
do.
survivors who want to help others.
Do
Even
you? Yeah.
kids. There was a child who I knew from foster care who was interviewed by Child Protective Services, and he was upset, like, oh, they're just using me to get information. But then when it was pointed out, you're helping other kids not to get hurt, then
yeah.
he was like, oh, yeah, that's what I want to do.
Oh,
I mean, even the children, I mean, they want to be sure to help other people.
yeah. That's great, isn't it? Because it's feeling that passion of, I don't want you to go through what I've been through.
Yeah.
How long have you been supporting other people, Mary?
Oh, well, I was a social worker when I remembered my abuse, so I think I went into that field so I could help people.
Oh, I see. So it's been...
Yeah, I placed over 100 kids in adoptive homes. That's what I did.
Wow.
The first part of my career. And I think I was trying to find homes for kids like I didn't have. So I would be really careful investigating the adoptive homes, that they were good homes. So I don't think I ever quit. I consider my filmmaking kind of an extension of my social work. It's like I'm doing my social work by film now instead of as an employment.
Oh, that's brilliant. No, I think it's very applaudable, and if it's okay to have your website on the
Please
homepage.
put
Is
my
that okay?
website, www.maryknightproductions.com. I love that. To have that. A lot of people like to look at my How I Healed page because it has a list of all those things. I've got a couple of essays on it. I got the film on it about the twins, and it's an easier one to watch. It's kind of a fun one to watch.
Yeah.
And I also have a film about domestic violence on it.
I'd
love for people to go there, and it's got my email. If someone wants to contact me, you're welcome to do so.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, I'll have to. I haven't watched all. I've seen, I think, the ones that have been on YouTube, and I'll have to check out the others, and that'd be great. Yeah, but
I also want you to put the YouTube, so your viewers can go directly to the YouTube. And I have English closed caption up now of the film, the longer film. So some people said there were some sound issues, so you might want to put that one up as opposed to the one without English closed caption.
Okay. Oh, I'll make sure. Yeah, I'll make sure those links go up there, and it's no doubt it'll be a blessing to many in the process. And it's been an absolute honour to speak with you, Mary, and have you on the show.
Oh, it's been so nice.
Thank you so much, and it's a blessing. So many lives in what you do, and I think you'll have a mansion in heaven. I think that's what awaits you. I think you have a mansion in heaven, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. This was good to talk to you.
Oh, likewise, it's been an absolute pleasure. And to anyone listening who can relate to what Mary has shared, there is support out there. As we just said, the link to her website and the YouTube channel will be on the homepage of the show. And God bless you, Mary, and to the audience.
God bless you. Thank you.
To the audience.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, lots of love and blessings.